strategies if we don't know where the evidence was. So they knew that the National Autism Center was working on a project, but the results were moving a little slowly, so they also did the same kind of review on the same body of literature. And the National Professional Development Center on Autism is a multi-site organization that includes the Frankfurter Graham Institute in North Carolina, the Waisman Center in Wisconsin, and the Mind Institute here in California. So personnel from those facilities reviewed the literature, and they published it in Preventing School Failure, that journal, and they found 24 strategies that they're classifying as evidence-based. And I've listed the 24 here. You'll see that some of them are the same or similar to those found by the National Professional Development Center or the National Standards Project, but they also broke up the behavioral package into more detail. So what we have is reinforcement, time delay, prompting, task analysis, discrete trial training. All of those would have been part of that 231 studies. So instead they broke that down to look at what are the strategies we're seeing over and over again show to be effective with students with autism spectrum disorder. And here's the remaining list of the 24 strategies and the website below where you can get this information. And I know this is a quick overview, but I really recommend that you spend some time going to that center because it's rich with information, and I'm going to share now. Yes?
Can you say the website, please?
Excuse me?
Could you say the website?
Sure. It is, well, http://autismpdc.fpg.unc.edu. So it's for Autism Professional Development Center, Frankfurter Graham, University of North Carolina, and EDU for the university. And as I said, this will be on a website that you'll have available from this conference, so you can look that up. I've written it a few times on the PowerPoint. Now this you probably can't read, but I want you to know it's there, so I put this up. This is a table, a matrix that's found on the website that I just went over, that discusses the overlap between those two studies, looking at the National Standards Project and the National Professional Development Center on Autism. And here's a matrix above for the National Standards Project, and to the left-hand column, those from the National Professional Development Center. And the matrix shows where there is overlap, saying that they both agree there's evidence. So if we take a look on this box here, it's for self-management. Both studies found that there was sufficient evidence to call self-management and evidence-based practices for individuals with autism. That they also write that they found that joint attention intervention they felt was an outcome measure and not an intervention per se. It's what you would do an intervention to gain as an outcome, so they didn't count that as one of the practices. And they also didn't count comprehensive behavioral treatment for young children. There's another study done looking at comprehensive models. But this table is a very good one if you wanted to just have one piece of paper that listed everything and said, okay, here's where the evidence is from 2009 and 2010. That would be a good matrix to have. And you can download it. The National Professional Development Center is supposed to be a technical assistance site for all of us. In addition, if you go to that site, when they list their 24 evidence-based practices, you can click on any one of those. So I mentioned self-management. You click on self-management, they'll describe an overview of the practice, so you can know what it is they're talking about that they evaluated. Then there'll be step-by-step directions for implementation, including an implementation checklist of each of the steps that you would need to do if you were to say, I'm doing pivotal response teaching, or self-management, or discrete trial teaching, or I'm using time delay effectively. So you can use this tool. You can download any of these items. You can use it for yourself, or if you're doing work with paraprofessionals perhaps, and you would like to know exactly how am I supposed to be implementing this strategy, how can I share this or teach this with the paraprofessionals that I'm working with. In addition, they list the evidence that they found for this particular strategy by age range. So perhaps you want to know, self-management, I wonder if that's something that's used with high school or age students. Or I wonder if preschoolers are using self-management. You can go and look and see the actual references of all the studies by age group. So you can see what's been done with the age group that you happen to be working with, and perhaps find a study where they're describing the intervention in enough detail that you could replicate it at your site. Finally, many of the different 24 strategies also has a video component on a different site. They're working in collaboration with another group to look at the AIM modules that show how you can implement the strategy, or an example of the strategy implemented in practice. So you have a visual idea. Okay, here's what this looks like if I'm going to be implementing it in my classroom. And again, you can share it with others. So I think it's a very valuable site for us as educators. So now that we know which strategies have research evidence, we're all set to work effectively, right? Perhaps there are other variables to consider. So here we have a Boy Scout all ready and eager with the tools of all the evidence-based practices ready to go. And this is how we might be feeling now. We know what they are, okay, but something is missing, and that is some training or some professional guidance about how do you implement this effectively. Because even watching a video, that may not be enough. In fact, I would say that training and professional development is key to the effective implementation of these practices. And I feel even more so being that that's sort of professional development and personal preparation is what our master's program is about, or what I'm in the business of. So I think this is a very important variable on getting it right. There were a group of researchers led by Dean Fixon that evaluated the implementation of any kinds of evidence-based practices across disciplines, including education, psychology, engineering, social work, etc. And what they found consistently over and over again, that information alone or training is not an effective implementation method. So in other words, the information you're getting at this workshop is a great start. I'm hoping that you'll come away today from one or more of these talks saying, oh, I want to try that, or I'm going to do this. That is an important beginning, but it's not enough to make sure that you're doing it in your work environment or in your home effectively. And this has been shown over and over again. Information obtained in a workshop does not result in effective strategy use, and skills demonstrated at a workshop do not generalize to the work setting for many variables, and that's another talk at another time. What you do need, what's the variable that you do need to make new strategies effective? That's coaching. Usually coaching by someone who knows about the strategy and can do it well in the actual setting. So in the classroom, in the home, or in the community, wherever you're working, someone that's there to say, yeah, that was right, that you got it. Or, okay, next time, why don't you do this a little differently, and it'll be more effective. Or did you notice how the learner responded to you when you did this? Perhaps here's a different way in which you could do that component of the strategy. So having that coach in the environment is what is critical to effectively implementing the strategy that has evidence, so that it will be effective for the learners that you're working with. So that kind of, in the setting, some feedback. And some of my master students and I replicated this information in a study that we did together. And Grundon, Pope, and Romero were all master students who were getting their masters with a specialization in autism, who were also the teacher of record in their classroom, or one is an autism specialist for an early intervention agency. I want to tell you a little bit about this study. So we were looking at how to better work with the paraprofessionals in their work environments. And we repeated by starting with a workshop that we thought was the best model we could come up with. The paraprofessionals and the teachers came together. We had a full day. They received information from me in the morning about different evidence-based practices, particularly focusing on prompting methods that would be effective. Then they met with their teacher, who gave them research literature to show where the evidence was. Then they practiced using the strategy with their teacher, so did behavioral rehearsal. Then we brought in children, real children, across the ages that they were working with, and they practiced using the intervention strategy with real children. And by the time they left the workshop, we could say they had the skills. They had the skills at the workshop, and then we took a look at what happened when they left the workshop and went back to the classroom or the home. And we had collected baseline data beforehand on their use of the strategies. And what we found was the same repetition, that the workshop that I just described may have resulted in some generalization to the typical environment of the classroom, but over time, without feedback, it went back to baseline rates. They went back to the way they typically did things all the time, and that's just a tendency that we have, no fault to them. When, however, the teachers provided feedback to them, remember what we did at the workshop? Remember what we talked about here? Remember what you did at the workshop? When they received specific feedback on the different strategies, then they became more effective in working with the students. And I have just some sample results from this study. This is Amanda, who worked with Casey in a home environment. This is her baseline rates using discrete trial teaching. Here was her workshop rates. So she was able to do the strategies 100% at the workshop. That's what the star is. Post-workshop, we see what can happen. That she started to use the strategies just like the workshop in the beginning, but with no feedback, it went back to baseline levels until she received feedback, and then the same thing happened in the generalization setting. Gretchen Grundon used incidental teaching in her preschool classroom. This was two of the paraprofessionals that she worked with. Mary, you can see Mary's rates were a bit above baseline level. Baseline goes back down after time, and then a little with feedback, we get an increase during free choice activities to use incidental teaching to develop academic skills and communication skills, but nothing happens on the playground. So the paraprofessionals were specific. Oh, I'm supposed to use this here and use this now, rather than saying, okay, here's a strategy that I can use throughout my day. So until they said, okay, Mary, now use these same strategies that we talked about that you're using well now in free choice. Let's do it when this child is on the playground during recess too, and let's get a lot of communication happening in that environment, and then we got an increase there. Same thing with Danny. Danny was our superstar at the workshop. He just was doing so many opportunities for communication that he was above 40 times he was working with the children, just a real superstar. But get him back to the regular environment during free choice and we go down, 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 and then on the playground, nothing. I guess maybe he thought the playground was a time that he could watch the children play. Unfortunately, that happens often, instead of working with the children as another opportunity to develop communication and other skills. But then when Danny got feedback, hey, use those skills on the playground, we got an increase there. And finally, Catherine Pope, working with Karen, she was using pivotal response training in her classroom, which is a preschool classroom. This is the workshop for Karen, high scores. We got the same kind of trend post-workshop here, going back to baseline until she got feedback, both in free choice and then again on the playground. So you can see we replicated the need for that kind of feedback by the teacher or by someone else skilled in the intervention strategy in the work environment. So sending paraprofessionals or educators, anyone to a workshop is really great, and I applaud you all for being here today, but it's just step one. I also wanted to read Mary's comments from a survey that we did after the study. It's in a way kind of sad, but I think it reflects what some of us are working with in our educational environment. She said, I've been working in special ed for 16 years, and this is the first time the teacher has taken the time to teach me what to do with the kids. It was really good to have training so we can do a better job with the children. Now, this is not necessarily the fault of educators. Educators have so much that we have to do in the classroom, and paraprofessionals often aren't given the time to meet with educators to receive this training. So it's not anyone's fault, but this is the system that we're working with. So trying to find creative ways to give this feedback in the classroom setting, and working with paraprofessionals to organize and negotiate how to have that time may be an important thing that we do if we want to implement evidence-based practices effectively. Because it's certainly not enough if just one person in the classroom is doing it effectively. We have to have everyone that's involved with the students with autism doing that effectively. And if we're talking about inclusive environments, we're also speaking about general educators and special educators and specialists as well. Okay, so now that we have the background about what are evidence-based practices, how do we put them into place, let's talk a little bit about using those strategies for challenging the quiet learners with autism spectrum disorders. And what I'd like to do is to start by giving you an example that from the perspective of a quiet learner with autism. I've created a kind of compilation of students that I see when I go into classrooms sometimes, and I'll go in and often the teacher will say, have a look at that one because he's really kind of running amok, or he has some challenging behaviors that I'm really concerned about. So can you have a look at this particular student and give me some feedback? That's often might be a question. But then when I go in, I'm noticing the quiet learner, and there's where that kind of draws my heart. It's like, oh my gosh, look at that one. It's continually being under the radar. What can we do for that child? So I'm going to be one of those quiet learners to show, as I say, this is a variety of classrooms, no one particular child, but I can see if you can relate to this child. Hi, my name is Tom. Quiet Tom. They call me QT for short. This is good because a lot of my teachers also call me cutie. I like school most of the time. During circle, we say hello, sing songs, and talk about the weather. I look at my shoes. My shoes. My shoes have lights on the backs of them that go on when I stand or walk. They have stripes that are black and white, and purple. The black and white stripes have a crisscross with black squares in the middle, and there are lots of them, and I sometimes try to count them. They have a purple L and a purple A, and well, you get the picture. During circle, when the teacher calls my name, I slowly get out of my chair, and then I walk toward her, and then I look at her, and I try to figure out what to say. I know that if I don't answer very quickly, she'll do it for me, because if she doesn't, some of the other kids will fall off their chairs, or scream, or who knows what. Sometimes, if I am very slow, the teacher takes my hand and takes my finger and touches the book or the object or the calendar. Then I get to sit down again. After circle, I get to work with the teachers. I like Miss Katie best. With Miss Katie, I work on colors. I really like colors. I was working on blue, and there was this really great blue car, and then it went away. So I forgot what blue was one day, and the car came back. We work on purple now. Did you know that red and blue make purple? Sometimes Miss Katie says, point to the purple one. Then I pick red. Then I pick the red one because it's part of purple. And Miss Katie says, no, try again, cutie. I also work with Miss Sarah. She is new. She makes lots of worksheets for me. Each day I draw a line from a group of animals or objects to the right number. I do this fast because then I get to color the rest of the time. Did I tell you I really like to color? Each day there's a new worksheet for me to color. The teachers call me quiet because I do not talk a lot. I can talk. I just don't like to do it a lot. I can speak using many words at once, and I know a lot of words. In fact, I like words. But my teachers, especially Miss Sarah, speak to me with a couple of words at a time. Sarah says, count, or color yellow, or math over, and she waves her hands. For recess, we go outside. Then I get to stand by the fence and watch the planes fly in the sky. This might be a San Diego phenomenon, I don't know. Sometimes they look like they will land on me. I get very excited. Miss Katie sometimes comes to play with me. This is okay. Sometimes she tries to make me play with the others, and I don't like this. I'd rather be alone. Sometimes Miss Katie gets very happy and tries to get everyone to play a game. I do not like games. My favorite thing is books. I like to look at the pictures in the books. I like the colors and the words. Sometimes we all read a book together. If I'm asked to point to something, I will try to point to a car or a plane or a truck if it's in the first picture. When I can, I look at all the books at school. I look at all the books until I hear, clean up, everybody clean up. After that, we line up to go home. sometimes I'm the first, and the teacher says, I like the way that QT is lining up. I'm happy with school. Are you? Are you happy with QT's education? Hopefully you're saying not so much. So why focus on students like him? Why pay our attention to the quiet ones? Because maintaining high expectations for across the domains and challenging these students may change the course of their educational outcomes well into the future. So this is an example of someone that would be in preschool or kindergarten or early elementary. But if we just let QT do his thing and we prompt them through activities, then by the time he is in second grade, third grade, fourth grade, he well and truly will be well behind his peers. He'll be working on another set of colors because he likes that. He'll have the same goals that he had in kindergarten, he'll have in first grade because he didn't meet them by just standing there and letting the teacher do it for him. So if we don't maintain high expectations and really challenge him, find out where his skills are, and provide activities that engage him and challenge him, like he already knew that purple was comprised of red and blue. He wasn't challenged, so he was bored. He just answered incorrectly, not due to the fact that he didn't know the answer, but he's bored with that. Let's try and challenge him and use things that really are going to develop his skills, and later that he might even use for his career, even when he is in kindergarten and preschool. At the Therapeutic Pathways, Colleen Sparkman, who is one of the co-directors of that program, this is in Modesto here in California, she told me that they strive for 80 to 100 learning opportunities per hour, with many of these being language related in their program. So they're collecting data on the staff and making sure that there's a lot of interaction happening with all the children that attend that program. This is pretty high. We're talking now about 1 per minute or more, and that's a lot of interaction time. But it's a lot of challenge for the students. And this may be something that you're looking at saying, "Ooh, I couldn't possibly do that." But maybe you can increase the number of educational opportunities or learning opportunities that happen from the situation I just described with Quiet Tom, where he's not answering in circle and sitting in the corner coloring, compared to 80 to 100. Maybe you can have a meeting with those involved with these students and saying, how can we increase the opportunities for our more quiet learners with autism spectrum disorders? Now, how do you know who the quiet ones are or how much they're engaged? There is a tool that was developed by Todd Risley quite a while ago that I found to be effective in looking at engagement. It's an easy one to use, but it gives you a general idea. It's called a play check method, and what you would do is pick someone to be an observer. It could be a paraprofessional working with you. It could be someone that's come to visit your classroom. I know a lot of educators have people that are going through education programs, and they come in and they come as visitors to be observers. Why not say, you know what, I'd be happy to have you observe. Why don't you do a structured observation for me and collect some information? What they could do is watch a group of students together and every 10 seconds look up and say, is that person engaged? Is that student engaged in this activity? Whether it's a newspaper reading, current events activity, or it's a circle time in the more traditional sense, they could look and see who is engaged. And this could be done one-on-one as well. So they score plus, yes, the student's engaged, paying attention, engaged appropriately, or no, they're looking out the window, they're squirming, they're staring at their shoes. And this is what an example of a sheet might look like for QT. At his circle time, we have, maybe he's in a circle with 6 children, and the person is done looking once every minute up and seeing which of these children are engaged. And then we see, oh my goodness, QT is only engaged 10% of the time. And it's difficult for teachers to really know what's going on, especially with circle time, how many are really engaged. So if we saw that information, we might say, okay, we need to do something about this, because 10% of the time is just too little. So here are some examples of evidence-based practices that we could use for QT, and I'm going to use this as a method throughout the rest of my presentation. I'm listing them on the above and then telling you where I got the strategies from. So behavioral package from the National Standards Project are going to be in purple, and those from the National Professional Development Center on autism will be in magenta, and that's the same format that I'll use throughout the presentation. So for QT, some examples might be to create an About Me book with pictures he can color that facilitates conversation in his discrete trial teaching format. So let's get his environment, let's get him talking about things in that book that he has an interest in. So maybe it's the kind of car that his family drives or his grandmother drives, or a train that goes past his house since he likes transportation. But it can be about me and his environment, something that he's interested in, but that would get the idea is to have him practice conversation in sentences and to discuss his own identity and his community identity as well. Maybe he could practice voice volume with prompts. Let's say that QT is one of these that speaks really softly, that you can hardly hear. So because you can't hear, you just ignore what he says. Well, let's get him to practice voice volume with prompts. A self-management. I've seen little ones, 3 years old, using token systems. So self-management can be used with preschoolers as well as with adolescents and adults. So maybe you have self-management for staying engaged, or for initiating conversation, or for speaking in a particular volume, using cars and planes that he uses as tokens, and then you trade that in for time for coloring. A motivational system for quick, independent responding. Already, he's a little one, and he's already learned, if I don't answer very quickly and I answer slowly, then the teacher may do it for me. This is something that we don't want to teach our students, because this will continue on, and they'll become very prompt dependent. It's an issue that we have with a lot of our learners with autism spectrum disorders. So thinking about, okay, let's have some kind of motivational system for quick, independent responding. And finally, transportation systems is what he likes. Let's use that to teach academic skills, perhaps using incidental teaching as a strategy. So now I have a couple of examples of real children that I received from some of my graduates from the autism program. And this will give you a general idea, the same, not someone that I've made up. So here's a little boy who's in a preschool classroom. He's in Catherine Pope's preschool classroom, and we'll have a look at him. And as you're looking at him, think about you're going in as a consultant or a co-teacher in this classroom, and you're looking at him and get a general idea of what kind of skills do you think he has, both in language, attention, etc. This is a snack period. Can you see that well in the back? That's as loud as it can go. Thank you. The paraprofessional was prompting T. Okay, now his textbook appears, so maybe that was the issue. He didn't have his textbook right there. So I'm looking at him and I'm wondering, well, he's got a textbook, maybe he can't talk. He's not really initiating use of the textbook, so I don't know what phase he's at, because we know for PECs, he would start with 2 people behind him, and then he would learn to go and get his textbook and use it from a distance. That's phase 2. So he can't be very far because he wasn't doing phase 2 on his own. So, and it's coming out just at snack. We know that that unfortunately is common practice, but that's not the way that the picture exchange communication system was designed. So now let's have a look at Catherine working with him. She has gone to the zoo, so that's an activity that he likes, so it's a relevant activity in the community. They've just come back from a trip to the San Diego Zoo, and now you'll see how she is embedding his interests in the session using discrete trial teaching, and we'll see what kind of communication he has.
Who's that? More monkeys. Turn the page for me. Oh, look at this. What are we doing? We are eating snack. Yeah, we're eating snack by the monkey. Took a break. And after snack, we went to see the kind of looks like a dinosaur. The sea otter. Sea otter. Small. Small and furry. After our snack, we also went to see what did the sheep say? Right. We remember. Ooh, what is this? Rafa is petting the goat. Would you on a goat? Could you in a goat? Oh. Could you in a goat?
Okay, so we see he has words, and in fact, pretty clearly when the content is of something that he's interested in and when someone is interacting with him. So he has a lot of skills he wasn't showing us in that first video at snack time, nor was anyone getting those skills or eliciting those skills. Okay, here's another example. This young man is in his home environment, and he is actually in the Philippines, and one of the graduates from our program, who's a classroom teacher at San Diego Unified School District, she works with them as their therapist or consultant, and uses video conferencing. So what we're seeing is what she's seeing through her video, pretty snazzy technology. But what you'll see here is Zach is sitting at the kitchen table. There's two women that you can see here. These two women are his therapists, and this is the beginning of the day, and his mother comes in with his sister's Cassie. So the mother comes in with Cassie. They're very happy to see this little girl, and there's some interaction that's happening in the family home between the therapists and the mom and Cassie. But have a look at Zach, and again, look at his engagement in this activity, his communication skills, etc. Now I'm going to have to lower the volume, but we'll get it started.
Hey.
runs by, so maybe he's noticing that. But otherwise, he's sitting there quietly. There's no real engagement in this activity with him. Yet this is the typical activity that happens in the home. The therapists come in, or they say hello to the little girl. There's a lot of action, affect, and activity that he potentially could be involved in. This is the natural environment that you would be wanting to teach too. So keep this in mind as we go through the next number of video clips, because I think that Jenna, who is the therapist, who's the consultant at this point, has really done an outstanding job of identifying those skills that might be needed for him to be successful in this kind of interaction. So let's take a look and see what some of those skills are and watch him to see what skill set he has. So the first one is that early on the parents were concerned that he wasn't interacting with his sibling, that he would just ignore her. So they said, can you do something to teach him to get started interacting, give him some context to interact with her. So what they used is video modeling. It turned out to be an effective strategy for Zach. And here's a good example of them using video modeling.
Zach, watch the movie. Okay.
So that's Jenna there on the video.
You love me, we're a happy family, with a great big hug and a kiss from me to you. Won't you say you love me too? Okay, Zach, play with Cassie. Cassie, how are you? I love you. You love me. We're all happy. We're happy. We do a big hug and a kiss from me to you. Oh.
He said, Cassie, get up.
Cassie, get up. Cassie, get up. Cassie, get up. Cassie, get up. Won't you sing? Okay, Zach, watch the movie. Play with Cassie. Cassie, how are you? I love you. You love me. We're all happy and lonely. We do great and a kiss from me to you. Won't you say you love me too?
Okay, so like some of our learners with autism, he had to go through the whole thing. So making sure that she stood up and he could finish it was important, but that made him a good candidate for learning these the sequences in a video through video modeling. So you can see how young she is there when he's learned that, and there's been several kind of interaction strategies and programs working with his sister since then. However, when we looked at the natural environment of her coming in, and there a lot of excitement around her greeting and seeing the therapists, maybe it'd been a while, there wasn't interaction at that point. So he has the skills to interact with his sister. He does interact with his sister, but it wasn't happening in that environment. I'm just wondering if it would be better if there's a way to lower the lights here. I don't see Belinda. Oh, there she is. Do you know if we could, because I'm actually seeing it better on my screen than there, and I don't know if that would make a difference. That's all right. that might be better. That's great. Let's try that.
What do you guys think? Is that better?
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
That's good, that's good. Yeah, that's good. I can still see. Okay, great. Okay, so here's another set of skills that he's being taught, and in this one it's identifying what people are doing. So it's an observation skill. So when you're in that environment like we saw in the first context, while he's looking around, we don't know for sure what he's thinking, what he's paying attention to, but having him focus on what's happening, what's happening. You would see Cassie is running, someone is laughing. Paying attention to the social context and what people are doing is an important skill, and often can be challenging for some of our learners with autism. So here is him working on that skill.
Shake, shake, shake. What are we doing? Shaking our body, shake our body. Shake our body. What are we doing? Shaking our body. Shake, shake, shake your body. Shake it. Shake it. And what did you just do? Oh my, you're so smart! What are we doing? And the other is clapping our hands. And what did you just do? We clapped our hands.
Okay, so pretty sophisticated now in language. So look at we are clapping, we clapped. I am, we are, so it's getting more sophisticated language, but focused on looking at what people are doing. Again, a good observation skill. I'm impressed that she's targeted that to teach that kind of grammar for him, that kind of sentence structure with something that's observational. Now, I have one last one, which is focusing on what people are wearing as she's teaching pronouns. And you'll see here a bit of a generalization as a focus, which is important. So they start by using these flashcards that are in front of him, and then move on to real people.
Come on. They both do. Oh my goodness, Dad! They both do! Very good! Okay, this time. Okay. Who has blue pants? He does. He does. Good job, Zach. Hey, Sam. Okay. Okay. Look. Point to he. Point to she. Okay. Okay, Zach. Again. Point to he. Verb, she. Good job! I like the way you pointed, Zach. Okay, now this time you have to look. Who has shorts? He does. Oh my goodness, you're so smart! He does.
She's enthusiastic.
Okay. Who has shirt? She. Who has shirt? Who has shirt? He does. Yes, he does, but try to look again. She does. So, he does shirt, she does shirt, so what's your answer? They both do.
Okay, so they certainly make it fun for him. But again, this is a complicated skill, looking at he, she, and both. but using a context that's about observation, an area that's often a challenge for individuals with autism. And now also what we see is he's generalizing and able to do it with his teacher present when it's cards and now real people, but we didn't see it in that other environment when they came in at that time. So some general overview, overall comments about the three situations, Zach, Andy, and QT. What we need to do is to create opportunities to practice communication when we're working with quiet ones. Because of the need to practice this skill. It is not coming naturally to them. Speaking in sentences, having social communication. This is the major impairment in individuals with autism. So with any of us, if we have weaknesses in our skill level, we need to practice in order to become good. So we want to make sure that the staff know the learner's language level and talk to the student at or just above their language level. Thank you, Linda. So we have the non-example of Sarah that talked to QT below his language level, but this can be a challenge, especially when we're working with groups or maybe in inclusive environments where you have lots of language levels. One example I've seen that I'm impressed with is that the Walden Preschool program, they actually publicly post a chart for the staff. The children are coded, so let's say there's a red diamond for a particular student or their initials are put up there, and then their language levels listed. So you know that one child is speaking in sentences, another child is paragraphs, another child is getting one word or word approximations, another is 2 words, and the staff have that as a visual cue to remind them about the language level for the group of children. So they don't generalize and speak above for some and below for others, but can keep that in mind when they're having any kind of group activity and can speak with them at their language level. And I think that that's very impressive because we know what a challenge that is for all staff. Creating opportunities to communication and use communication require an attempt at the level. So being creative in a staff meeting to say, okay, how are we going to get them to talk? Because we're sometimes so focused on how are we going to get those students that are somewhat disruptive to quiet down, we may be concerned about that and not thinking about, okay, this quiet one over there, how can we get them to speak even more than they are? So as I mentioned just before, for all of us, that if we're going to get to learn a new skill, we need practice with feedback in order to improve our performance. All of us can relate to some new skill that we were learning where we were really bad at the beginning. And we fell down, or our dance steps were clumsy, or whatever it is that we might have been trying new. And we were not very good. And we would still not be very good if we didn't have an opportunity to practice and get some feedback by a coach that had more skills than us. So for our individuals with autism spectrum disorders, what we're talking about is social communication. So they need an opportunity to practice. The more the better. Practice this skill so they can become fluent and better at social communication. And if we are just happy that they're quiet and not saying anything, they're not getting that opportunity to practice. We also need to target generalization from the start of any program. So instead of thinking, okay, I'm going to teach this skill in a small group setting, or this is going to happen during snack, or this is going to happen during this center time in the classroom, we need to think from the beginning, what's this going to look like when they're at home? What's this going to look like when they're in the community? What's this going to look like when they're with peers? Now, how do we work ourselves backwards? What are the peers going to say to him or her that is going to result in a response? And can we embed that in teaching the task from the very beginning? We know this from the research literature, but in practice we might not do that. And then we're teaching the same skill over and over and over again. So we have to think, what do we want this to look like in the natural environment, wherever that is, and target that from the beginning. Stokes and Baer published an article in 1977 where they outlined how we can facilitate generalization, looking at the naturally maintained contingencies. In other words, taking a look in Zach's situation of the family coming in and saying, okay, the family come in and they say, hi, Zach, how can we use that as a starter to develop conversation between him and the adults? They also suggest in 1977 to arrange for opportunities to practice skills in many environments, using different materials and in the presence of various peers and adults. So we saw a nice example of that in the instructional program for Zach when he was going from flashcards to real people, really good. But it also needs to be flashcards, real people, and in the home and in the community, wherever he's working and interacting with others. Targeting social interaction with peers, siblings, and adults. This is listed as an evidence-based practice in various formats from the two agencies. And examples to start this would be identifying mutual interests with peers, practicing sharing of objects, because often a lot of our learners with autism would prefer to be alone and not really share what they have or interact with others. But you can use their object. If they happen to be the cool one with the iPad, this might be a good opportunity for peer interaction. Teaching how to initiate, getting things started. Zach might have been sitting there, he was sitting there with all those skills because that video was taken after he had the instruction and all of those precursor skills that I had shown. So he was sitting there, but he wasn't initiating interaction. And that is a skill in and of itself. How do you initiate? And we're going to see some of that in a later presentation today when we learn about the peers program. And then practice group participation, practice in groups. So some specific suggestions I might have, and hopefully a lot of you are out there thinking, okay, this is what I do. If I was the educator, these are some practices I would do in my classroom. Or you're thinking about, okay, I've got a student just like that. I know who she's talking about. This is what I'm going to do when I go back to the home or back to the classroom or back to the community. But I've just put some examples that I came up with for each of them. So for QT, I would say to identify target social skills and turn-taking at circle. He's really wasting circle time by staring at his shoes, and he really could be interacting with his peers. To organize peer play around the theme of transportation at recess. So instead of staring at the planes going by, well, maybe there could be a game about that, or there could be a game with transportation. This would at least get him to interact with peers, and maybe he would start saying, I like games, because he'd like that transportation game. Using audio and video to teach academic skills instead of worksheets. He's a very independent, quiet worker, which maybe the worksheets might teach some other students, but perhaps for QT, we could have him put his responses into a tape recorder and listen to himself play them back, or use video, or videotape himself and do some self-monitoring. Something that involves a bit more of his communication than doing the worksheets. And if he likes coloring so much, he said, I love coloring. Okay, so here's a strength area. He loves colors, he likes coloring. Well, maybe he's a little budding engineer or a designer. Let's think about that and let's challenge him. Let's have him use color coding to learn about schemas. And this is something that's also found in a lot of standardized tests, are these color coding and schemas. Maybe he could learn how to match based on color. He can make designs based on color. He could build things out of Legos. But you could say these are early design skills that we want to foster in this child so that when he is an adolescent or young adult, he's got a set of skills that are really marketable, instead of having him color farm animals on worksheets. For Zach, I would say focusing on appropriate independent initiations. We know he's got language skills and pretty sophisticated ones right now, but he's not initiating conversation. He might not really enjoy conversation or be initiating that. So we want to focus on that, make a big deal out of his own initiated interactions, not ones that are fostered by the therapist or his parents. I was thinking Zach could be the leader of a game adapted from Mother May I. For those of you that don't know that game, there's a leader and they tell people, okay, you can take 3 twirls, and you over there, you can do 2 giant steps, and you can do 2 baby steps, but you're the leader. There's a person up there tells the others how to move. So it's a way of interacting with others and having some control, and Zach might enjoy that, being able to focus on other people, watch what they do, and give them feedback. Practicing entering conversations with phrases like, I like your white shirt. We know he can say that. We know he has the observation skills of who's wearing what. He knows his colors. He has that language. But maybe that would be a way to enter a conversation. That's the way we often enter conversations. We might say, oh, I like what you're wearing. So it's certainly socially appropriate. So why don't we teach that to Zach as a conversation starter? Or mentioning what he's doing. I'm wearing new shoes today. that would be a conversation starter. Then people would look and go, oh yeah, those are nice. Where did you find those? But something to get that conversation going. And just in general, practicing conversation starters such as excuse me, guess what, and reinforcing that for unprompted use would be important for Zach. So all of those things would help to facilitate the generalization of the many skills he has to the natural context of being with his family and being with peers. And for Andy, I would say, would you, could you when at snack? Would you, could you when he's in the back? Would you, could you all the time? Have him speak and let him rhyme. I want to thank Catherine Pope for providing the video examples and examples of her work, and Jenna Slechter for providing the examples from her work with Zachary. And thank you for your attention. Sure, I think we've got 5 minutes, so I'm happy to answer questions if anyone has it on any of the content. Yes? I'll repeat your question. Okay, so the question is a very important one. I'm really glad you asked. Thank you. Which is, she's saying that she has a son who has challenging behaviors, but she feels that he may not be challenged either. And I think that your point's a very good one, is that we need to do that for all children. And in fact, one of the preventative strategies for individuals that have challenging behaviors is to look at the environment and see if whether or not they're bored. Because that is often a precursor to acting out and getting attention, is if they happen to be not challenged. So I think your point is well taken. We need to challenge all of our students with autism spectrum disorders and have high expectations and challenge them all. So it's not just for the quiet ones, but to have the same consistency throughout our classroom. And if we do, we might find that those that do have challenging behaviors, that those get reduced. So it's the same for all.
How would you, I think what I have observed is that because of those challenging behaviors, they're sort of being pushed to the side.
Yeah, so I guess hopefully we know that our individuals, our learners with autism spectrum disorders are much more than their challenging behaviors. In other words, part of being on the spectrum is that typically you have areas of strength or areas that might, certainly of interest, that may be very strong points. So we want to identify them and build on those. So for QT, it's his transportation, his love of transportation, it's his coloring, it's those things that we want to build on. And the same would be true for those with challenging behaviors. We would look at, if QT all of a sudden said, well, I'm bored, but now I would like to get a little attention rather than sitting here quietly and staying under the attention. So now I'm going to kick the child next to me. We would be doing the same thing. We'd say, okay, he likes coloring. We want to have a motivational system, maybe not for quick responding, but let's have a motivational system for responding appropriately in this context and remaining challenged. So the same strategies are important for all of our learners. It just happens that why I wanted to focus on the quiet one is that they're not as good at getting our attention as those that might have more acting out kinds of behaviors or those kinds of behaviors. But you're right, we don't want to say they have challenging behaviors, therefore let's lower our expectations about what they can do across domains, because they can be extremely skilled in areas. We want to